Hey, what's up, beautiful card fighters? So I wanted to profile what I would consider more or less a standardized version of the GANDEEVA deck. And I have just recently finished this deck thanks to a couple friends of mine. I was borrowing cards for a little bit for a friend of mine that did get his GANDEEVA cards like a couple weeks before I was able to finish my playset. But now I was just able to like finish off with trades and just what I've been pulling from locals with this deck. And I wanted to show what I believe to be more or less what you should be running with GANDEEVA if you feel like you don't really want to focus more on deck building this format. I feel like right now in this format, it's very much, if you already are playing a very powerful deck building doesn't really matter as much unless you're like teching out to what you expect to see either at your locals or like a big event towards it's going to give you like a very big upper hand in that matchup. Then I just feel like it's better off to just go with a more standardized list and just practice your proficiency. Like I've said this to you guys in past videos, I feel like proficiency is key to just being good and getting good at this game. I honestly, you know, instead of just focusing on, oh, is my deck different, you should probably just focus on, am I doing the right plays? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? And etc. But let's go ahead and get into the deck profile. So I was originally running the full Bob ride line. Shout outs to Devi. He did put me on he put me on that ride line and I did really like it, but this deck just feels so tight in terms of your main deck space for your engine and I guess technical non-engine, even though it works really well with your engine. So I just went with the basic GANDEEVA ride line, and it's unfortunate sometimes when your opponent plays around the grade 1 because you don't really care about the booster, but you can just tuck this away with Strajinga and it was technically like basically like a free retire or just like a free draw and bind. But getting onto the main deck, oh, and this, now that I'm actually like utilizing my counterblast the way I want to, I really do appreciate the -1 to the cost of GANDEEVA's effect off the grade 2 of the ride line. But getting onto the main deck, going on to the grade 3s, I'm going to break this down by grades like I do in every profile. But in this one, it's even more important that you focus on the count. I feel like in terms of deck building in GANDEEVA, I feel like the more standardized you are in the count of grade 3s, grade 2s, and 1s, the better, like, I guess like the more consistent your deck will be in terms of proccing GANDEEVA's skill and getting your desired retires, in my personal opinion, of course. But we're playing 2 copies of the Persona Ride. Unfortunately, that was the one card in the deck that I really had to cut because I didn't want to cut it because soul is also very crucial in this deck, and that's really the only way you generate soul is by rewriting your Vanguard. But at the same time, again, it's just very important that you keep a good count of 1s, 2s, and 3s towards, I didn't want to get overbalanced by 3s. I'm already running way more than I'm actually, not way more, but a little bit more than what I'm reasonably comfortable with. And then 4 copies of Strajinga. Strajinga's like the best card in the deck, low key, just because this is the card that just makes it so easy for you to get the 5 cards in bind zone on your first turn 3 if your opponent didn't commit anything or if you're going first. So that's why we really want to max out on 4 copies of this card. And then 3 copies of Best Harvest. I did try to get away with 2 for 1 more Persona Ride. But 3 copies is just best. Ideally, you want to resolve this at least 2 times in 1 match. And it is just kind of very feels bad when your opponent does say like, okay, I'm going to commit to a full board, but I'm going to pressure you at the same time. Towards, or all right, I'm going to clear your board, but if you don't have Best Harvest, it's just like a very feels bad towards you're committing cards to board to clear their board, and your hand just feels lacking. Because you're going to have to either do it again or, you know, you're lacking in key pieces to be able to move on in the game, in my opinion, of course. Moving on to the 2s. So for the grade 3s, this is 9 grade 3s. Ideally, I would want 8, but of course, I need to play 4 Strajinga and I need to play at least 3 Best Harvest, in my opinion, of course. But 4 copies of Alafar. Alafar is your grade 2 attack extender when your opponent's at grade 3. So ideally, I know it can get kind of cloggy in the beginning, GANDEEVA players, especially if you're going first, but still going first with this deck is very strong, especially if you can get the crit online as fast as possible, which is something I do try to do with this deck. But running this at 4, even if you damage it, it's very crucial. And what I generally do is, I know like, again, shout outs to Devi, is I generally don't try to commit to doing this twice in a turn unless I know that I can just force out almost all my opponent's hand or just force the win right then and there. I try to hold on to the second one for follow-up in next turn. So that's why 4 copies is just very important. And then 4 copies of Rugen. Rugen, I know people have cut down Rugen to like either 3 or 2 copies. I still feel like Rugen is just a very important main deck engine piece in GANDEEVA because he's basically, technically, he's like your 4 other copies of Strajinga because it's these 8 cards that allow you to get the 5 cards in your bind zone on your first grade 3 turn if your opponent committed 0 cards to board, which is just very important to me and why I max out on these cards versus maxing out on other non-engine pieces, which I'm going to show you right now. 3 copies of Meteor Flare Dragon. Initially, I wasn't running Meteor Flare Dragon. I was trying some weird grade 2 techs. I was trying the Brachio card that when it hits, retire itself, retire card, draw a card. I didn't really like that card. It didn't feel like it synergized well enough with the deck. And when I was playing against the Ava matchup against one of my buddies, shoutouts to Ryan, he was helping me playtest this deck and different builds of this deck. It really felt like in that matchup, I just needed this card. Like I needed have access to this card just to shut down their 20k in total intercepts. So that's the main reason why I am playing it at 3 copies, but it's also very helpful against the Jet matchup, which will generally rush you anyways, especially if they go second, to whereas I'm able to pop a card, like pop an interceptor or pop an attacker, and still go face. I feel like at least in my opinion, well, you're going to hear that a lot in the spec profile, but I feel like it's very important in the Jet matchup that if you can retire, cool, but if you can't retire, don't attack their rears in the early game. The rears that they play in the early game are just quite expendable, to whereas I would rather just like pop a rear guard and still swing at face just so I can rack, even if I'm expending cards from my hand, which is ideally what I want, because I'm taking a card off board and taking a card out their hand at the same time, but I just want to be able to secure those first couple points of damage to be able to secure, to secure my victory later on in the game. So that is 11 grade 2s, which I feel like grade 2s and grade 1s, which are the most common cards you're going to find on your opposing opponent's board, are the most crucial grades to hit off of your top 5 ability for GANDEEVA. And then 4 copies of Bowmaster. I've seen people also cut this down to 3, which I don't necessarily agree with. This is your only countercharger in the deck, and Rugen counterblasts, Alafar counterblasts, GANDEEVA counterblasts. It's just very important that you have access to this countercharger, which can also turn into an extender to get the extra cards in the bind zone that you need. There were so many times, like I've drawn this off Best Harvest, or I've had this in my hand, and I've drawn Alafar off of Best Harvest, and I'm like, okay, cool. Now I can do my multi-attacks where necessarily I wouldn't be able to do my multi-attacks. And then for the rest of the grade 1s, I'm playing 2 of Maestro. This is kind of like your weakest card in the deck, but you still technically have to run it, at least in my opinion. I guess you could technically make this any grade 1 that works best for you, but Maestro works best for me just because it removes itself from board and it like basically recycles itself while getting you a bind at the same time, but it ups my grade 1 count, which again, grade 1s are going to be the bane of your existence in the Jet matchup, because they're generally going to be filling up their boards with just like 1 or 2 grade 2s, and then the rest are like 3 to 4 grade 1s. Sorry if you guys hear that in the background. Those are my dogs, and my girl is doing her schoolwork in the background. Getting on to the perfect guards of the deck. 1 of the Blitz Order, and then 3 of the DPG, not much to say there, but that does make it to where your total count of grade 1s is 10, which ideally I would like it to be somewhere between 12 and 14, but again, just the space in this deck just really makes it hard to run the ideal GANDEEVA ratios that you would ideally ideally would like to run. Onto the triggers. For the regular heal trigger, again, I don't believe in the effect heals. I've lost because of the effect heals. I've gotten punished because of the effect heals. I just don't. Me personally, the effect heals don't work for me. If you want to play 2 of them, if you want to play like 1-and-1, cool. But me personally, regular heals are just always where it's at. They're always good, in my personal opinion. Getting onto the critical triggers, playing 8 vanilla crits. You don't really need the into soul crit. At least in my personal opinion, you don't need it in soul crit. But of course, I'm the proponent of better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. But I'm making the personal decision here to I would rather just have the 5k attacker or the 5k booster. But you can run into soul crits here, but I'm just running vanillas. 3 of the fronts, I have seen GANDEEVA builds play draws. Even without Best Harvest, which I was initially playtesting this deck without Best Harvest, I was trying to like the purest version of the deck as possible to see if that was better than just splashing in the Meteor Break Dragons and splashing Best Harvest as non-engine. And Best Harvest is just better just because you really need to be able to see your pieces to affect your opponent's board every turn, which is just going to be the key to winning more than 90% of your games. Is can you affect your opponent's board while at the same time pressuring them in hand. That's what wins GANDEEVA its games, in my personal opinion. So 3 fronts, don't really like draws, I'm too scared to deck out. And then 1 of the Dragon Empire OT. It really works really well in GANDEEVA because GANDEEVA keeps the crit for the entire turn. So it's just an extra layer of Vanguard pressure that you do have. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for the deck profile. Tell me what you thought about it in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It takes literally 2 seconds out of your day. You know, the channel is growing. Even though I haven't been posting the past week, the channel has been growing. And just like I'm hearing all of you guys' comments, I'm chatting with you guys because of the community posts. And it's just a great feeling overall. And I would love to continue that with y'all. Anyways, later.